My name is Lena Parker, and I'm 34 years old. 18 months ago, I sat in a lawyer's office and listened to a stranger read out loud that my parents were leaving me nothing. The house I had quietly paid for, month after month, for 6 years, was going to my cousin. Every board, every shingle, every inch of the roof my money had kept over my mom and dad's heads. My mom held my hand while the lawyer read it. She smiled at me the whole time, so I did something quiet. Something nobody in my family noticed for one entire month. And when my mom finally texted me about the mortgage, my reply took 10 seconds to type and cost me everything I thought I couldn't live without. What happened after that tore my family down to the studs. But here's what none of them knew. I kept every receipt. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet people find their voice. Grab your coffee and settle in. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. If stories about family, betrayal, and hard-won boundaries speak to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe, because this one starts in a parking lot in February. It started with a text from my mom the week before. "We're getting our affairs in order, sweetheart. We need you there Tuesday." I read that and felt something warm and stupid bloom in my chest. Needed. I took a half day off work, which, if you know accountants in February, is basically a kidney donation. I'm a CPA at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. Tax season doesn't pause for family. I paused anyway. I drove the 40 minutes north to Millbrook with a folder on the passenger seat. Inside it were copies of their insurance policies, a summary of the mortgage, a list of account numbers, all organized with color tabs. I'd made it that morning. I thought I was coming to help. I thought, finally, that they want this daughter with the spreadsheets in the room. The law office sat above a dentist on Main Street, the kind of building where the stairwell smells like carpet from 1987. I climbed the stairs rehearsing helpful things to say. Then I opened the conference room door and stopped. My Aunt Dana was already seated, purse in her lap like a small dog. Next to her sat my cousin Tyler, 36 years old, wearing the blazer he wears to things he wants to go well for him. 2 cups of coffee already poured. None waiting for me. My parents sat across from them, and my dad was looking out the window at the parking lot like it owed him money. Why would my cousin be at my parents' estate planning meeting? I stood there holding my folder full of tabs, and the lawyer, a gray, careful man named Alan Whitfield, looked up and said, "Lena, thank you for coming. This isn't going to be easy." Whitfield opened a binder and read it plainly, the way you'd read a weather report for a storm hitting someone else's town. My parents had created a revocable living trust. Into it went the house on Maple Street, the checking and savings accounts, my dad's truck, all of it. Upon the passing of both of my parents, the sole beneficiary of everything in that trust would be Tyler Brooks, my cousin. Then Whitfield looked at me over his glasses and read the last part slowly. As for their daughter, Lena Parker, the trust made no provision intentionally, and, the document said, "With love." With love. Somebody billed hours writing that. Whitfield explained why I was in the room at all. When parents leave the child out, he said, he advises telling that child face to face. It prevents ugly surprises later. It prevents challenges. It was, he said, the kindest way. I remember nodding, because my body was still being polite while the rest of me left through the window my dad was staring at. My mom reached over and took my hand in both of hers, and her hands were warm. They were always warm, and she said, "Nothing changes, sweetheart." She squeezed my fingers. "You'll still help. That's who you are." I looked at my dad. He hadn't met my eyes since I walked in. 67 years old, a mechanic his whole life, hands like old leather on the table, and he studied that parking lot like there'd be a test on it later. Something about that scared me more than the binder did. Across the table, my Aunt Dana smoothed her skirt and delivered the line she must have practiced in the car. "We all agreed," she said. "It's what's fairest." To make sense of the word fairest, you have to go back 6 years. Tyler had a sandwich franchise then. He talked about it like it was a movement, not a shop that sold turkey on rye next to a vape store. When it started sinking, he didn't come to me, the numbers person. He went to my parents. And my parents, without telling me a single thing, refinanced the house they had nearly paid off and pulled out $80,000 in cash to save Tyler's franchise. I found out after the papers were signed. I found out the same month my dad had his first stay in the hospital, when his heart first started its long argument with him. The math they signed up for was brutal. A new loan, $128,000, 15-year term, right around $1,400 a month with taxes and insurance folded in. My dad's pension and their Social Security couldn't cover it, not with medication stacking up. The bank gave them 30 days to figure out the first payment. My mom didn't ask me for money. She did something more efficient. She cried at her kitchen table with the statement in front of her and said she didn't know what they were going to do, and then she looked up at me. I was 28. I had just made senior at my firm. I said the words that would define the next 6 years of my life. I'll cover it for a few months until things settle. The franchise died anyway, quietly, the way those things do. And here's the part I chewed on for years afterward. Nobody in the family ever knew the real number. $80,000, gone into Tyler, and it was never spoken of again. A few months became 6 years, 72 payments, the 28th of every month, $1,400, automatic. I set it up as an autopay because I knew myself. If I had to press the button manually every month, someday I'd hesitate, and I didn't want to be the kind of daughter who hesitates. Over time, I added their cell phones to my plan. I added my mom's car insurance when the premium jumped. When the roof needed patching 2 springs ago, the roofer's invoice came to my email. I paid for my parents' life the way you water a plant, without ceremony, without being asked twice. And my own life got quietly smaller around it. I kept renting a 1-bedroom north of Columbus while my coworkers bought houses. I did the math on my best friend's destination wedding and sent a gift instead. Every Sunday dinner, my mom passed her phone around with photos of Tyler's kids and asked me, with real tenderness, if I was still managing to save a little. Here's the thing, though. I wasn't naive about it. I'm an accountant. Twice I asked to be put on the deed, or at least to sign a simple loan agreement, something on paper. Both times, my mom looked wounded and my dad rubbed his neck, and she said, "The house will be yours one day, honey. Why make it cold with paperwork?" The refinance was already done by the time I ever saw a document. The bank only wanted its money on time, and their 30-day window had left no room to restructure anything. So I paid first and negotiated never. The house will be yours one day. That was the promise that got shredded in a conference room above a dentist. I believed it for 72 straight payments. Back in the conference room, I set my folder of color-coded tabs on the table and did not open it. I asked one question. Why? It came out steadier than I felt, which is a skill you learn doing audits. It was my Aunt Dana who answered, not my parents, which told me everything about how this decision got made. "Tyler has children, honey. You're set. You've always been set." She said set like it was a diagnosis, like doing well was a condition I had that excused everyone else from ever considering me again. My mom nodded along, and she added softly, like she was sharing something wise, that leaving the house to the one who needs it keeps a family close. "Family gathers around need," she said. "Tyler will fill that house with kids on Christmas morning." Tyler himself leaned back in his interview blazer and said, "You can still come for Christmas, Lena." Obviously. Obviously. I remember looking at each of them, one at a time, the way you look at a balance sheet that will not reconcile, hunting for the entry that explains the whole. My dad was still at the window. I stood up, thanked Mr. Whitfield for his time, and said I had a quarterly deadline, which was even true. No shouting. No tears. I gathered my folder of tabs nobody had asked to see. And I'll tell you a strange thing. My calm made the room angrier than yelling would have. Dana's mouth went thin. My mom's smile flickered like a bulb. People who script a scene where you cry do not appreciate it when you skip your lines. I was almost to my car when I heard my dad's voice behind me, ragged, calling my name across the cold parking lot. My dad came down those stairs too fast for a man with his heart, and by the time he reached me, he had to lean one hand on my trunk and breathe. 3 steps and a railing, and it emptied him. That's how I learned, without either of us saying the word cardiologist, that things were worse than they were telling me. Lena, he said, your mother and Dana, once they decide something, it's like arguing with weather. That was it. That was the whole defense of his silence up in that room. I looked at him and saw a man who had spent 40 years fixing other people's engines and had never once in his life fixed a dinner table argument. Anger and love can sit in the same chair, it turns out. They were both sitting in me. Then he dug in his coat pocket and pressed something into my hand. Small and cold. A key. The key to his workshop out back of the house. The shed where he rebuilt carburetors and hid from Thanksgiving. In case you ever need a place to think, he said. My dad has never in his life said the word sorry to me. He hands people keys instead. He opened his mouth to say something else, then his eyes went over my shoulder, up to the office window, where the curtain moved. He patted my trunk twice like it was a horse and went back inside. I sat in my car and put the workshop key on my keyring, next to the house key I'd had since I was 16. Then my phone lit up on the seat with its polite little chime. A reminder from my bank. Upcoming transfer. $1,400. In 3 days. I stared at it for a long time. That night, back at my apartment in Columbus, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine I didn't drink and opened my banking app. I do reconciliations for a living. I find where the money went, and I make the two sides agree. For 6 years, I had never once run that report on my own life, and I think some part of me knew better than to look. I scrolled all the way back. There it was, a green column marching down the screen. The 28th of every month. $1,400. Over and over. Past job changes and lease renewals and 2 winters I skipped replacing my snow tires. Mortgage, phone plan, her insurance. The roof, $3,100, 2 springs ago. On one side of the ledger, more than $120,000 of my life. On the other side, the word sweetheart, and a promise that had just been notarized out of existence. Accountants have a term, uncollectible. There's a moment you stop calling something an asset and admit it's a loss, and you write it down, and the books finally tell the truth. My thumb hovered over the autopay screen, over the little link that said cancel. It would have felt good to press it right then, at 11 at night, with wine I wasn't drinking. I didn't. I put the phone face down on the table and went to bed, because I had learned this from my job, and it has never failed me. Never make a 6-figure decision angry late at night. In the morning, I wasn't angry anymore. In the morning, I was something my family had never seen from me before, and honestly should have feared more. I was thorough. Saturday morning, coffee, laptop, a legal pad. I made a list like I was offboarding a client, because in a way, I was. Item 1, the mortgage autopay, canceled in 4 taps. 6 years of my thumb hovering, and in the end, the bank didn't even ask if I was sure. Item 2, the family phone plan. I split their lines off to run through the end of the billing cycle I'd already paid, then transfer to their own account. I'm not the kind of person who cuts off a 63-year-old woman's phone mid-month. I'm the kind who reads the terms first. Item 3, my mom's car insurance, set to non-renew at the end of its term, notice mailed to her address by the company itself. Item 4, the little savings bucket I'd labeled house emergency, $6,000 I kept for their roof and furnace surprises. I renamed it and moved it into my own savings. It's amazing how long a task takes when it's dread, and how fast it goes when it's just clicking. 90 minutes, start to finish, 6 years unwound. I didn't text anyone an announcement. No speech, no ultimatum, no long message ending with "I hope someday you understand." They had made their arrangements in a lawyer's office without me. I made mine at my kitchen table without them. And I want to be clear about one thing, because it matters later. I didn't block a single number. Blocking is loud. Blocking is a door slam, and a door slam is still a conversation. I wanted the other thing. The thing my family had never once given me. Silence that simply doesn't show up. Then I put the legal pad in a drawer and waited for the 28th of the month. Here is what happened over the next 30 days. Nothing. That's the whole plot twist, and I promise it's the worst one in this story. Nobody called to see how I was doing after that meeting. Nobody texted to say, "That must have been hard to hear," or, "Are we okay?" My mom sent me exactly 2 messages in a month. One was a photo of Tyler's kids in matching pajamas, forwarded without comment. The other said, "Did you see Dana's birthday post?" with a thumbs up sticker. That was the complete harvest of a month. For 6 years, I'd told myself my family was busy, that love in the Midwest is quiet, that showing up is what counts, and I was the one who showed up. 30 days of silence ran a cleaner audit than I ever could. The calls I used to get were never about me. They were about the roof guy, the insurance card, the phone upgrade, the thing. Always the thing, and with no thing due yet, I didn't exist. And my life, without the $1,400 going out and the guilt coming in, got strangely, guiltily, good. I went for runs again. I made dinner for one and ate it slow, sitting down, like a person. I looked at a listing for a little house with a porch and let myself want it for a whole minute. Turns out when you stop paying, you find out fast what the calls were really for. The 28th came. The 28th went. My phone stayed dark. March 1st. Nothing. The grace period on their loan ran to the 16th, and I knew that date the way you know your own birthday. The 16th passed in silence too. Then, on a gray Tuesday in early April, my phone buzzed. Before I tell you what that buzz was, let me ask you something, honestly. If you've ever been the one who pays quietly while somebody else gets the credit, tell me in the comments what finally made you stop. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because what my mom texted me that gray Tuesday is the reason I'm telling this story at all. I was at my desk at work, halfway through a client's inventory schedule, when the phone buzzed face up beside my keyboard. Mom. I looked at the preview and the whole floor of my office went very quiet in my ears. The mortgage is due. That was the message. No hello. No my name. No question mark even. After a month of nothing, after 6 years of everything, my mother opened her phone, found my name, and typed the exact sentence you'd send to a bank teller. The mortgage is due. I sat with it for a while. My tea went cold next to the monitor. I thought about 72 transfers nobody ever said thank you for, and a notarized document that said, "With love, nothing." I typed a long reply about the meeting, about respect, about 6 years, and I deleted it. I typed a shorter one about the $80,000. Deleted that too. Explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you is just another payment, and I had canceled my autopays. So I wrote back the only thing that was true and let it be the whole message. Not my problem. I hit send, put the phone in my desk drawer, closed the drawer, and finished the inventory schedule, and I want you to know my hands were almost steady. It took 11 minutes for the phone to start ringing inside that drawer. It didn't really stop for 3 days. The messages from my mom came in stages, like grief. If grief were mostly about a payment schedule. Stage 1 was disbelief. "Lena, did you get my text? The mortgage is due. Call me." Stage 2 was, "This isn't funny." Stage 3 arrived that evening, and I'd been waiting for it the way you wait for a storm the radio already promised. "After everything we've done for you." I read that sentence twice, sitting on my kitchen floor, and I laughed once, one dry sound, alone in my apartment. Then came stage 4, the one designed to work. "Your father's heart can't take this stress. Think about what you're doing to him." That one I made myself read only once. I answered a single call that week, because it was her, and because 34 years of wiring doesn't rip out in a month. Her voice was calm and reasonable, her church voice, and she said, "Honey, family doesn't keep score." I looked out my window at the parking lot of my building, 3 floors down, 40 minutes from the house my money had been holding up. "Then why does the scoreboard only ever show what I owe?" I said it gently. I meant it gently. She was quiet for a second, and then she said we'd talk when I calmed down, which was interesting, since one of us had raised her voice on that call, and it wasn't me. I said goodnight, Mom, and hung up while she was still talking, politely, the way you leave a meeting that should have been an email. Then she did the thing that changed the war. She took a screenshot of my text, "Not my problem," and sent it to the family group chat. By Sunday, my Aunt Dana had a whole version of me ready for distribution. Dana called me on a Sunday after church, which was strategic. She'd have witnesses to her patients. "Lena," she said, in the voice she uses to run bake sales, "I'm going to say this with love. Family isn't a ledger. Family isn't a ledger. Write that one down, because it comes back later in this story, and when it comes back it detonates." She talked for 11 minutes about duty, about how her sister, my mother, cried all weekend, about how ungrateful was not a word she wanted to use, gently placing the word ungrateful on the table like a casserole. I said, "Okay, Dana." At reasonable intervals. Calm is free, and it drives a certain kind of person insane, and I'd rather not say how much I enjoyed learning that. By Monday I was out of the family group chat. Removed, not left. A cousin in Indiana I hadn't spoken to in 2 years texted me, "Heard you cut your parents off." Wow. Somebody's wife I met once at a funeral unfollowed me, which, devastating. The story moving through my family was clean and simple. Selfish Lena, doing well, sitting on money, letting her parents lose their house over a grudge about paperwork. Nobody in that version mentioned 6 years of payments because nobody knew. Quiet help is invisible help. I had designed it that way, out of some idea about dignity, and now the invisibility was the whole case against me. One person broke pattern. My Uncle Pete, my dad's brother, a retired electrician who says maybe 40 words a year, texted me exactly this. "2 sides to every roof, kiddo. Call me sometime." I cried a little at that one, standing in my kitchen. Then Monday morning, the receptionist at my firm called my desk. "There's a Tyler Brooks here to see you." Tyler stood in my firm's lobby holding a knit hat in both hands like a man auditioning for the role of Humble. He'd driven 40 minutes on a workday, which for Tyler is a moon landing. "Lena, be reasonable," he opened. "Not hello. It's just a few payments till we figure things out. You know I'm good for it." I asked him what he'd figured out so far, and it turned out what he'd figured out was me, resuming, forever. Then, because Tyler cannot help himself, he showed me the whole card. He and Megan had put a deposit on a bigger house across town, 4 bedrooms, good school district. "Counting on how things are structured now," he said, actual words, in my lobby, under my firm's logo. Structured. My parents were alive, breathing, eating dinner in that house on Maple Street, and their nephew was already spending it. "Let me make sure I have this right," I said, quietly, because the receptionist was pretending hard not to listen. "You're spending an inheritance out of a house 2 living people still sleep in." His face did something complicated. "You make everything sound ugly," he said. "I make things sound like what they are," I said. "It's a gift and a curse." I went back to my desk and finished my day, and I was fine, until I got home to my apartment that night and stood at my kitchen counter and looked at my keyring. The house key was still on it. Brass, worn smooth, cut for me at 16 so I could let myself in after practice. I slid it off the ring. It took a second. Keyrings fight you, they always fight you. And I dropped it in the junk drawer, and I shut the drawer with my hip. The next morning my dad called, and my dad does not call. "There's a diner by the old part store on Route 9, he said. 11 o'clock. Just us." I drove up. He was in the corner booth with coffee he wasn't supposed to have, and he slid a laminated menu at me like a peace treaty. For a while he talked about nothing, spark plugs, a neighbor's terrible new fence. Then he set his cup down and told me a story I had never heard in 34 years. "When your grandma got sick," he said, meaning my mom's mother, "it was your mother who moved in. 4 years. Nights, diapers, doctors. Dana was busy. Dana had Tyler. Dana sent cards. Your mother spent her whole wedding fund on your grandma's care, every dollar, and when your grandma died, the house, what was left, went to Dana's side anyway, because Dana needed it more." He looked at his hands. Nobody ever thanked her. Not once. She waited to be seen, kiddo. And it never came, and something in her went to sleep. I sat there with that. My mother had been me, 30 years before me, and had come out of it believing the machine was correct, and the only mistake was expecting anything back. She wasn't repaying her own debt. She was reissuing it, to me, with interest. It didn't excuse one thing she'd done. It explained every single thing she'd done, and there's a difference. And both can be true at 11 in the morning in a diner on Route 9. Then my dad reached across and put his hand over mine. "I'm going to fix it," he said. "Give me a little time." When he stood to leave, he had to grip the table edge twice before his legs agreed. Spring turned into summer, and the machine did what machines do. Through Uncle Pete, because I heard everything through Pete now, I learned the first real bank letter had landed on Maple Street. 90 days behind. Words like default and acceleration. Words from my textbooks, sitting on my mother's hall table under her praying hands figurine. My mom told the family the bank had made an error. She said it at a cookout apparently, with a straight face, while the propane hissed. The bank had made a 90-day, $4,200 error in her disfavor, and would be sorting it out shortly. Dana convened a family meeting about the situation. I know because I wasn't invited to it. And I know how it ended, because Pete called me after with the flat voice of a man reporting weather from a state he's glad he doesn't live in. Their conclusion, and I want you to hear the actual sentence, was this: "Lena will come around. She always does." Not, "We should call Lena." Not, "Maybe we got something wrong in that lawyer's office." Just, "She always does," said the way you'd say the sun rises in the east, because that's what I was to them. Not a daughter, a natural law, a utility you build the whole grid on and never once check the bill. And Tyler, heir to the entire estate, seed of the family's future, contributed to the arrears that summer, a sum I can report exactly. $0. The man had a deposit down on a 4-bedroom and couldn't find 1 month for the roof he was inheriting. I wrote none of this to any of them. I ran my miles, did my job, watered my one plant. Then, on a Tuesday in August, my phone rang at 4 in the morning. Nobody calls with good news at 4 in the morning. It was my mom's number, and her voice had no church in it at all. Just fear, stripped down to the studs. "It's your father, Riverside General. Come." I was dressed and on Route 23 in 9 minutes, and I'll tell you what I thought about in the dark with the wipers going, because it surprised me. Nothing about money. Nothing about the trust. I had stopped paying their bills and it had cost me my seat in that family, but I had never once stopped being his daughter, and the difference between those two things, which my family could not see, was the entire war. Heart failure, the cardiologist said. Decompensated. Which is a word that means the argument my dad's heart had been having for 6 years was ending, and not in his favor. The ICU at 5 in the morning is all beeps and blue light. My mom saw me come off the elevator and I watched her face do a terrible arithmetic. Relief, then guilt, then the ledger. Always the ledger. And the first thing my mother said to me across that hallway was, "Did you bring your checkbook? Or just yourself?" I stood very still. "Just myself," I said. "That's what's left." And I walked past her and sat down next to my dad and held his mechanic's hand, careful of the lines, until the sun came up over the parking garage. One more thing happened that morning. A nurse came in to check his lines, moving quiet and sure, and when she turned, I saw it was Megan, Tyler's wife. Our eyes met over my sleeping father, and she didn't smile, and she didn't look away either. Near dawn, my dad's eyes opened and he pulled me down close. His voice was mostly air. I had to put my ear almost to his mouth, and even then, I nearly missed it. "You were never the bill, Lena." That's what my father spent his strength on. Not an apology, not an explanation, no mention of trusts or lawyers or houses. "You were never the bill." Then his hand went slack around mine and he slept, and the monitor kept it steady in different time. I sat back in that vinyl chair and looked at him and understood that he had seen everything, all 6 years of it. Every transfer, Every Sunday I wrote the checks and passed the potatoes, and had said nothing, and that his silence and his love were two trains that ran on the same track his whole life and never once collided until now. 2 days later, he died in his sleep. The nurse said it was peaceful. People always say that, and I've decided to believe her. He never got his little time. Whatever he'd meant by, "I'm going to fix it," it stayed unfixed. A wrench set down mid-job on a bench, and I told myself that was that. Grief, it turns out, doesn't reconcile. I do that for a living, and I couldn't make one column of that week agree with any other. And then, standing in the funeral home hallway 2 days later, numb, holding a folder of his service songs, I overheard my Aunt Dana around the corner, on her phone, using her bake sale voice on Alan Whitfield's office. She wanted to know, and this is a quote I will carry to my own grave, whether Ray's passing changed the trust at all. My father was not yet in the ground. The estate sale of me had already reopened for business. We buried my dad on a Thursday. Sunny, unfair weather for it. The reception was in the church hall, casseroles and drip coffee and 30 relatives balancing paper plates. I moved through it like staff, refilling the coffee urn, because hands that are busy can't shake. Dana gave a beautiful eulogy, she really did. Then she got a room full of grief and coffee, and she couldn't resist the audience. She posted up in the middle of the hall, voice pitched to Carrie, and said to a half-circle of aunts, "Well, some of us were here for Ray all along, and some of us have money for a new car but not for their own dying father's roof." Forks stopped. 30 faces did the math and arrived at me. My car, for the record, was 6 years old. Bought used. But a good lie needs props more than facts. I felt the flush go up my neck, and I felt the old wiring light up. Defend, explain, itemize. And then I felt something newer and colder take the wheel. I set down the coffee pot. I looked at Dana across that church hall, across the casseroles, and I said, at exactly the volume of a spoon against a saucer, "Ask my mother what the refinance 6 years ago was for. That's all." Then I picked the pot back up and refilled Mrs. Alvarez's cup, and the room made a sound like a held breath, because half of them had never heard the word refinance attached to that house in their lives. Dana's face flickered just once, like a screen losing signal. Out on the church steps 10 minutes later, my Uncle Pete caught up to me, coffee in hand, and said quietly, "What refinance, Lena?" I told him on the steps, in the tone I use for audit findings, because that tone is the only thing that has never once failed me. 6 years ago, Tyler's franchise was dying. Mom and Dad refinanced a house they'd nearly paid off and handed him $80,000. And it's all right there in the county records for anyone curious. New loan, $1,400 a month, on a mechanic's pension. The bank gave them 30 days, and I picked up the payment so they wouldn't lose the house, and I made that payment every month for 6 years. 72 payments. Over $100,000 on the mortgage alone, closer to 120 with the phones and the insurance and the roof. 2 of my cousins had drifted over behind Pete, the way people drift toward a downed power line. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and turned the screen around. One screen, no speeches. The green column, the 28th of every month, marching back further than the screen could hold. "I don't do cash under the table, Uncle Pete. I do statements." Pete looked at that screen for a long time. He's an electrician. He spent 40 years finding the exact spot where a circuit quietly fails, and I watched him find it now, and his jaw set, and he said one sentence I'll keep forever. "You paid for the roof they sold out from over you." Then he handed me back my phone like it was evidence, which it was, and went inside, straight past the casseroles, straight to my mother's table. By Wednesday, the story in my family had flipped upside down, and my Aunt Dana learned what it feels like when the group chat is about you. Here's the thing about a family narrative. It holds right up until one person checks the math, and my family, it turned out, contained a title agent. My cousin Rachel pulls property records for a living. It took her one lunch break to confirm the refinance, the date, the amount, the whole shape of it. All public, all filed at the county. She posted the recorder's page to the group chat I was no longer in, with no caption. Pete told me the chat went silent for a full day, which in my family is a constitutional crisis. Then the questions started, and they were not aimed at me. Dana tried. She has always tried admirably. It was an investment in family, she said. It was nobody's business. Lena is twisting things. But every answer sounded worse than the question, the way it does when the numbers are sitting right there. And slowly, cousin by cousin, aunt by aunt, my family did something I had genuinely stopped expecting. It turned around. The wow cousin from Indiana texted me a paragraph of apology I read 3 times. Mrs. Alvarez from the church sent a card. And one quiet Tuesday night, a number I didn't have saved lit up my phone. I'm sorry. I didn't know about the 80,000. Tyler told me it was a small loan. Years ago. I believe you. It was Megan. Tyler's own wife. The nurse who had checked my dying father's lines. Apologizing to me from inside the house that was supposed to inherit mine. I sat with that message a long time. Vindication, I learned that fall, tastes like cold coffee, necessary and bitter and nothing like the ads, because being right pays no bills. In October, a sheriff's deputy climbed the porch steps on Maple Street with a foreclosure summons. Ohio does foreclosure through the courts, slow and formal, a machine with paperwork at every tooth. Complaint, summons, 28 days to answer, then judgment, then the county schedules a sheriff's sale on the courthouse steps. I knew the timeline cold, and for the first time in my career, the timeline was happening to my childhood bedroom. And one by one, every exit my mother reached for turned out to be painted on. Borrow from family? The family had seen the county records now. Nobody was pouring savings down what one cousin, unkindly and accurately, called Dana's well. Sell the house before the sale? My mother refused to list it. It's Ray's house, she told Pete. I won't have strangers in Ray's house, apparently preferring the strangers the county was about to send. Tyler? Tyler had problems of his own by then. The deposit on the 4-bedroom was gone, forfeited, and the credit cards he'd been living on while waiting for his structured future had begun calling him the way banks call, politely, then hourly. And Megan had gone quiet on him in a way that any married person can tell you is the loudest sound in a house. Dana floated the idea of a payment plan funded by the family jointly, and the family jointly discovered previous commitments. Here's what nobody did, though. In all those weeks of scrambling, meeting, praying, and blaming, not one of them called me to say the word, sorry. They workshopped ways to get the money. They never once workshopped the apology. Pete confirmed this, because I asked him directly, and Pete doesn't soften things. It's why I love him. So when my phone finally rang with the law office's number on a cold afternoon in January, I already knew 2 things. They were out of exits, and I was the last door. Before I tell you what they offered me in that office, be honest with me in the comments. Would you have paid to get your childhood home back? Sit with it a second, because I only got one chance to answer. And if this story has you holding your coffee a little tighter, subscribe now, because you're about to find out how it ends. Same building above the dentist, same conference room, same long table, and I swear the same coffee. My mother was there in her good coat. Dana beside her, subdued in a way I'd never seen. Tyler in the blazer, thinner, and Alan Whitfield, careful as ever, laid it out. As the surviving spouse, my mother had full authority to amend her share of the trust. He confirmed it plainly. And so, the offer. The loan could still be reinstated before the sheriff's sale, arrears, late fees, the bank's attorney costs, just under $20,000, and the account would come current. Foreclosure dismissed, house saved. If I paid it, my mother would sign an amendment that same afternoon, already drafted, sitting in a folder in front of Whitfield. The house on Maple Street would go to me. Signed, notarized, witnessed. Everything I had wanted for 6 years. Everything. In a manila folder 18 inches from my hand. And then my mother reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers, warm as ever, and smiled at me with her eyes full and said, "You see? It was always going to be yours. Nothing changes, sweetheart. Nothing changes. The exact words from the day they erased me, offered back now as a comfort, and I felt them land somewhere very cold and very clear. Everyone around that table thought they were watching a reconciliation. I was the only one who could see the price tag hanging off it. I told them I needed 24 hours, and I drove back to Columbus alone. That night, I did the only thing I know how to do with an impossible decision. I put it in 2 columns. Column A, take the deal. Get the house with the magnolia my dad planted the year I was born, the kitchen doorframe with my heights penciled up it, the porch where I learned to read. Get my mother, 63, alive, the only one I will ever have, holding my hand again. $20,000. I had it. That was the obscene part. I had it sitting in savings, the down payment I'd been building for my own someday house. 1 wire transfer, and I'm the daughter who saved Maple Street. Column B, walk away. Keep the money, lose the house forever, and lose her. Probably. This time for good. I stared at those columns past midnight, and being an accountant finally paid off in a way school never promised. I noticed something about column A. Every line in it was a noun. House, magnolia, doorframe, mother, and every line in column B was a fact. 72 payments, no thanks. A trust that erased me, with love. A month of silence, then a bill by text message. Nothing changes, sweetheart. Nouns against facts. The nouns were beautiful. Nouns always are. That's their job. And I wanted them so badly my stomach hurt. And I understood, staring at my own handwriting, that the deal wasn't selling me the nouns at all. Reinstating the loan meant reinstating me, the wallet with a pulse, back in her seat, $1,400 a month forever, forgiven exactly as long as I stayed useful. Same product, new packaging. I closed the notebook. Then I got in my car at 1 in the morning, and instead of my bed, I drove north, to Millbrook, to the one door I still had a key to. The workshop behind the house on Maple Street smelled like my whole childhood, motor oil and cedar and cold concrete. I hadn't been inside since before the funeral. I stood in the dark a second, then found the pull-chain light my dad never upgraded, and the bulb swung shadows across the pegboard, every tool outlined in marker, a mechanic's museum. And there, on the workbench, up on sawhorses, sat something I had never seen. A porch swing, half-built. Oak slats planed smooth, joints cut and dry-fitted, clamps still on, waiting for glue that never came. My dad had been building a porch swing in his last months, with a heart that emptied him on 3 stairs, and he had never mentioned it. Then I saw the pencil marks on the crossbeam, his blocky mechanic's handwriting, shakier than I remembered, and I read it, and I sat down slowly on his stool. For Lena's front porch, whenever she finds home. Whenever she finds home. Not for the house. Not for Maple Street. My father, who never learned the language of apology, had spent his last strength on lumber, telling me the one thing the trust and the lawyers and my mother never would. Home wasn't the house I'd been paying for. Home was somewhere out ahead of me, unbuilt, mine. This was his fix. Not an amendment, not a signature. Permission. I cried then, the way you cry when nobody can hear it, with my sleeve pressed to my mouth, sitting in sawdust at 2 in the morning. Then I stopped, because he'd have wanted me to check the joinery, and I did. And it was perfect, of course. I turned off the light and locked the door. The next afternoon, I walked back into Whitfield's office, where all of them were waiting, and I set 1 envelope on the table. 4 faces watched that envelope, and I watched them watch it, because I have sat across enough tables to know that what people expect to see tells you everything. My mother looked at it with soft, welling relief. Dana, with hunger she'd have called concern. Tyler just looked at it the way he looks at everything, like it might be for him. Whitfield, professionally, looked at nothing. It wasn't money. I slid it across, and my mother opened it with her thumb, still half smiling, and pulled out a single printed page and a small brass key. The page was a statement, one I'd built myself the night before. my proudest piece of accounting. Every transfer, 6 years of them, date and amount. The 28th of every month, 72 lines, and at the bottom, in the reconciliation column where the balance goes, no number at all. Just a short phrase, typed where the total belongs. Paid in full. The key was the house key, brass-worn smooth. Cut when I was 16, retired from my keyring back in the spring. My mother looked up, lost, and I kept my voice at the level I'd use to walk a client through a difficult return, because that voice is the truest thing I own. I'm not reinstating the loan, I said. I'm not taking the amendment. No. Dana's breath came in sharp. I kept going, still level. You're not selling me a house today. You're selling me back my seat at this family's table, at $1,400 a month for the rest of my life. I already paid 6 years for a chair nobody saved. My mother's hands had gone still on the table, and something behind her face was moving now. Slow, like ice starting off a roof. The house was never the inheritance, I said. I was. I was the estate, and you spent me. Quiet. The radiator ticked. Then, because some rooms you only get once, I turned to my aunt. You told me family isn't a ledger, Dana. You were right. It isn't. I stood and pushed in my chair, and the last of it came out no louder than the rest. But you're the ones who kept sending me the bill. And that, finally, was the moment my Aunt Dana came up out of her seat, and the calm that had held that family together for 60 years came apart in one afternoon. I want to tell you what the end of a family religion sounds like, because I was there. It sounds like a bake sale voice cracking through its glaze. Dana, on her feet, no church left in her at all. You smug little after everything this family. You sit there with your spreadsheet like some. You don't get to decide what family owes. The sentences kept collapsing under their own weight. And I understood, watching her, that her fury wasn't really about the 20,000. I was breaking the rule that had organized her entire life. The strong ones pay and the needful ones receive. And if I could just refuse, then it had all been optional. All along, her whole cosmology. And she could have refused too. Once, and hadn't. Tyler was talking underneath her, a wet jumble about his girls, about the school district, about how I was making everything ugly again. I didn't answer either of them. There was only one person at that table I owed a goodbye. My mother hadn't yelled. She was looking at the statement, at 72 lines of the 28th, and when she finally spoke her voice was small and terribly clear, and the room went quiet for it. I gave my mother my wedding fund, she said. 4 years of my life, nights, everything. Nobody thanked me either. She looked up at me, and for 1 second I saw all the way down, past the church voice, past sweetheart, to a 20-something girl holding a dying woman's hand in a house that would never be hers. That's what daughters do, Lena. We hold the family up. There it was. The whole machine, laid out on the table next to the key. And she wasn't wrong about her own life. That was the terrible part. Somebody should have thanked her. Somebody should have split that old house fairly. Nobody did, and she'd been billing me for it ever since. I know, Mom, I said, and I made it gentle, because it was the last soft thing I had, and I gave it to her on purpose. Somebody should have thanked you. You don't heal that by doing it to me. Then I thanked Mr. Whitfield for his time, and I walked out of that office past the dentist smell and down into the January air, and I did not look back. And losing everything I'd wanted felt exactly like being able to breathe. 6 weeks later, the county sold my childhood home on the courthouse steps. I didn't go. Pete went, out of some sense that a Parker should witness it, and called me after from his truck. It took 11 minutes, he said. A man in a quilted vest, an investor with a folder of properties, bid about 2/3 of the appraised value, the way they do, and a deputy read numbers into the cold. And that was that. Maple Street, sold to a stranger between a parking ticket and lunch. The mechanics of what came after, I can report like the accountant I am. The sale money went first to the bank, then to the fees, the county, the attorneys, the machine feeding itself. What trickled out the far end went to my mother, and it was not nothing, but it was not a legacy, and rent and living would eat it in a few short years. The famous trust, the one read aloud to me above the dentist's office, still existed. Technically. It now held a truck and some furniture. Tyler's entire structured future had come down to a document with nothing left inside it, a frame around a hole. And Tyler's own arithmetic came due the same season: forfeited deposit, cards maxed against an inheritance that no longer existed, and Megan, who had apologized to me from inside that marriage, packed the girls and went to her mother's in Toledo to think, she said. I took no pleasure in the girls' part of it. The rest? I'll let you judge me. I felt the way you feel watching a car you warned somebody about finally throw the rod. Dana called my mother reckless. My mother called Dana a schemer. And the two sisters who had agreed it was fairest stopped speaking to each other over whose fault the fair thing turned out to be. Not my problem, as somebody once texted. And yet, when the dust settled, exactly one person in that family showed up with a truck and boxes to move my mother out. But I did it my way, not theirs. I drove my mom to the senior apartments on the east side of Millbrook myself, on a Saturday, in a rented pickup with her life in 14 boxes. I helped her fill out the application the week before, sitting side by side at Pete's kitchen table, my pen, her signature, income lines and references, the stuff I'm good at. What I did not do, and will never do again, is pay. I told her that plainly, in the truck, both of us watching the road because it was easier than watching each other. I'll drive you, I'll carry boxes, I'll do your paperwork forever. It's the family discount. A breath. But I won't pay you to love me. I tried that for 6 years, and you kept the money and canceled the love, and I'm the only one of us who noticed it was a bad deal. My mother sat very straight in the passenger seat, in her good coat, and looked out the window at the town going by, and said nothing. And for once, her silence didn't cost me anything. We carried boxes up in the elevator, mostly quiet. She told me where to put the praying hands figurine. I put it there. It wasn't warm, but it was true. And I'd take true. On my way home, I drove down Maple Street one last time, slow, no signal, no stopping. The magnolia was bare. There were new curtains in my old bedroom window, and the porch light was on. Somebody else's yellow warmth spilling on somebody else's steps. I sat at the stop sign an extra second, and I waited for it to gut me. And here's what I can tell you actually arrived. The porch light wasn't ours anymore. It never really had been. It had been mine, one transfer at a time, 72 months of mine. And now, for the first time since I was 28 years old, it was nobody's debt at all. I drove the 40 minutes back to Columbus with the radio off, and the windows cracked. And the cold felt clean. That was months ago. Here's where everything landed. This spring, I signed my name at a title office, and this time the house on the paperwork was mine. Small, blue-gray, 2 bedrooms on a quiet street outside Columbus, a front porch that faces west. The loan officer said my finances were the cleanest she'd seen all year, and I laughed harder than the joke deserved. The payment is almost exactly what I used to send up Route 23 every month. Same money. It just finally changed direction, like a river coming back to its bed. My mom and I have coffee on Sundays now, sometimes, at her apartment. An hour, no more. We talk about her neighbor's cat and the church bulletin and never about Maple Street. It is a small relationship, small like a coffee cup, and it is honest, and those are 2 things it never was before. She has never said sorry. I've stopped waiting, the way you stop waiting for a check you've written off, and some visits. When she pours my coffee before I ask, I let that be what it is. Dana doesn't speak to me, and I have made my peace with the peace. She tells her version at church, Pete tells the other version at cookouts, and the family sorts itself accordingly, which is all a family ever does. Tyler is in Texas, working warehouse construction, sending Megan money for the girls. Megan texts me sometimes, photos of my little second cousins, and I answer everyone, because those girls are going to grow up watching how the women in this family get treated, and I intend to be a different example on that screen. And the porch swing came home with me in the rented pickup, wrapped in moving blankets like a patient. I finished it in my new garage over 3 weekends, glued the joints he'd fitted, sanded where his pencil marks were, though I sealed the crossbeam instead of sanding it, because some handwriting you keep. It hangs on my porch now, facing west. I sit there in the evenings with tea, in the house my own money bought, on the swing my father built for a home he knew I hadn't found yet. And most nights, that's enough. Some nights I still cry in the shower over all of it. The house, my dad, my mother's warm hands, and that's the truth too. And I've decided the crying is just the last of the old payments leaving the account. If I've learned one thing worth passing down the family line, it's this. Walking away from a debt that was never yours isn't abandoning your family. It's the first payment you ever make on your own life. That's my story. 72 payments. One text from my mom. One cold reply. And a porch swing my dad never got to finish. So I finished it. If someone in your life treats your love like a bill, you're allowed to close the account. Share this with somebody who pays quietly. Tell me in the comments what you would have done at that table. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.